Hello and welcome to another episode of the Emperor Experience in 2020. We're still quarantined. We're still sitting around watching TV, but at least we've given ourselves something to focus on because I've got another set of notes here. These are for The Last Jedi, and yours truly, Kevin, and Jeff are going to do as... Well, again, like I said last week, we're going to, as my broadcasting idol, Joseph Scrimshaw says, we're going to engage with the material presented.
Now, before we start, I want to say that I'm just being honest.
The look on Ed's face.
Upon first viewing, I enjoyed this movie that we're going to talk about. Upon first viewing.
God.
Well, I mean, we were all fighting that suspension of disbelief issue,
Yes.
right? So,
Okay, not all. Okay, pump the brakes there, Chief. Not all. I was the doomsayer, the soothsayer at the beginning that you all called a dick because I called this movie steaming pile of shit at the jump, and I would like at least a few points for that.
Kevin, we'll give you your points for that. All right,
I deserve at least 50 points.
I'll give you 49.
69.
No, that's oddly sexual. I refuse.
You know what? Fine. I'll take 49 because I'm trying to be positive now.
Okay.
all right. So once again, we're doing our criticism of The Last Jedi. Last week we did The Force Awakens, and this week we're going to do the middle chapter in the Disney trilogy, Episode 8, The Last Jedi.
And in the background, it's good to note that we have Empire Strikes Back playing because The Last Jedi is clearly supposed to be not Empire.
Yes, it subverted my expectations because I wanted The Empire Strikes Back, and instead I got a hysterectomy, which I didn't think I could get as a male, but that's what I ended up with. So, things that I like, starting with the opening sequence. I think the starting in space and then the way that the camera flies down through the channel of all the escaping shuttles from the surface of what's the planet they're on?
Not Yavin 4.
Yeah, not Yavin 4. I was gonna say Takadana, but that's Maz's planet.
Yeah.
I was going to say Agent Kloss, but that's the planet they're on in Rise of Skywalker. So the not Yavin 4 planet, when they swing down from the space shot down through the escape shuttles and onto the planet's surface, where Carrie Fisher's daughter, who we now know as Lieutenant Connix, then looks up and sees in the sky, in atmosphere, she sees the initial Star Destroyer come into view, and then we cut back up to the space where the Dreadnought comes in. And I also, one of the other things that I like specifically about that opening sequence is the way that the Dreadnought enters the shot and the way the Dreadnought looks. I think it's particularly menacing. Mm-hmm. I think the big gun on the bottom is cool. And I especially like the First Order officer, who is a holdover from the old Empire, Canaday.
I think he's really cool.
Well, one of the interesting things, and one of the things that I like, so you can't say that I've only been critical of Rian Johnson. One of the things that I like is that during the dailies, they noticed that Canaday was so engaging on screen that they actually found opportunities for him to be on screen more. Now, that may have been to the detriment of Domhnall Gleeson, but who knows?
But the reason why I like that character, too, because he has the Empire. Like, everyone in the First Order is so fucking manic. The reason why the Empire is intimidating is because they're cold and they're calculating. Like very few people in the Empire go over the top with their manic anger. The old Imperial, he was definitely firm and he was definitely and he definitely had a presence. However, he wasn't over the top.
Yeah, no, he did a great job.
Yeah.
He definitely overshadowed Hux, but you could tell
Yeah.
very early into the movie that Hux was being turned into a comedic or a comedy relief type
Hugs.
character.
Now,
Yeah.
just in terms of real quick to comment on standout performances, Ed, didn't you were like in a past episode you brought up that Ryan had this thing where he would give out like what was it, lollipops or like figurines or something to really stellar guys on set. Like he would reward people on set with some sort of thing. I might be making that up. Hang on, just
No,
forget I said.
I don't recall telling you, but then again, we've done a few episodes. It's been a while. I was trying to be positive initially. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I saw The Last Jedi in theater 10 times. So I must be crazy.
You are.
No, kiddo. This is me at my most masochistic.
Yeah, I think I just wanted so bad that like maybe every subsequent time that I went that the Marvel humor wouldn't be as bad and all the stuff that we're going to get to.
Well,
but it's definitely made all the more humorous currently while we're watching The Empire Strikes Back.
Well, it's interesting too because everything that we like kind of touches upon the "it was beautifully made" comment. It's all visual based and cinematography based, for the most part.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Like George Lucas's comment was very all encompassing.
Yeah, it's almost like George is smarter than he's given credit for.
Yeah.
All right, so continuing on, things that I like. Poe's attack run on the Dreadnought.
Now,
once again, is a visual thing.
Yeah, not including the
this does not include the conversation because that is included in my dislikes under the heading of terrible Marvel humor. But the actual visual of Poe doing the attack run and clearing out the cannons on the surface of the Dreadnought, specifically the first time that we see the foot pedals of an X-Wing shown, so we get to see more of how the actual mechanics of flying an X-Wing are done. I thought that was kind of cool. Like when Poe did that, when he took out the last cannon and then he kind of like slid and went back around the corner. And the sequence showed him like working the foot pedals with the flight stick, and that's how he was able to make it do like the little button hook turn that he did, where he was like dragging the flames when he came around. It was just a cool sequence. It was beautifully made.
There is a note though. I do like some of Rian Johnson's sort of massaging of certain tropes in Star Wars. Like for instance, I have a bad feeling about this line was delivered by BB-8 in the cockpit, or in Poe's X-wing in his little droid speak. I think that's kind of nifty. I mean,
no, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I think the whole thing with Rian Johnson is that, because the one thing that I keep hearing on the Star Wars podcast that I listen to is that they firmly believe that if Rian Johnson hadn't become a director, that he might be hosting his own Star Wars podcast himself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think perhaps the Star Wars fan part of his brain just couldn't quite make the proper connection to the wacky artist part of his brain where it was most necessary. And instead of making the best Star Wars movie that he could have made because he was a true fan, he decided to take all of the Star Wars knowledge he had and turn everything he knew about Star Wars into this inverted meta commentary thing.
Well, I think you see that it's really challenging and risky to be creative with an IP that you didn't make. And you see it like look at any long running comic book character. How many times have they been passed on to a different writer and that writer does like some weird out there shit that maybe doesn't work. Like Spider-Man has had his whole marriage rebooted. He's been a billionaire. He's been a poor college kid, poor college student, fugitive of the law, media mogul. Like he's been like they keep doing new things and not all of them work. And Star Wars hasn't been handed off to that many people. It's been under the heading of the Lucas film group, and now this is the first time we're seeing someone else take a crack at it. And I think the same way that another writer might do Spider-Man terribly, and another one might do it, but the next one might fix a lot of those problems. This is, instead of it being just a writing gig, it's a multi-billion-dollar media empire. So that when the beats don't hit, you can't just reboot and start a new run with a different writer. You know, so
I'm going to make an analogy here. We've all heard this song. "Comfortably Numb" by Pink Floyd. Yes,
delightful song.
Yes. I have actually never heard it. So
really,
there's 100% chance that you have heard "Comfortably Numb" and you just don't know the song based on the name and the lyrics.
It's got one of the best guitar solos ever. Like, it's one of the most like emotional guitar solos ever. Now, Dream Theater is a big time progressive metal band, actually from New York, and their guitar player is a guy named John Petrucci. Phenomenal guitar player. However, they have a live cover album called Saucer Full of Floyd, where they cover a bunch of Pink Floyd songs. Among those songs is "Comfortably Numb," and the ending solo, John Petrucci just starts to shred the guitar. Just starts to shred the guitar like a madman. Now, obviously, John Petrucci is a lights out phenomenal guitar player. That said, is that kind of like that kind of like over the top guitar playing really appropriate for a song like "Comfortably Numb"?
Well, especially not when that final solo is so well known.
Exactly. And I think that's what is kind of the problem with Rian Johnson, that he's not a bad filmmaker, but when you get that, for lack of a better word, masturbatory as an artist, and you want to leave your prints on a previously known thing that much, it shows, and that's kind of a problem, I think.
You make a strong point there. We've had this conversation more than once, folks. I mean, we'd be lying if we said this was the first time that we've all gotten together and discussed The Last Jedi.
Well,
it's been a while since we've talked about it on camera, but we've definitely had some conversations in between.
And in a way, we're giving Rian Johnson what he wants at that point, because I think, he basically said, like, his idea of a movie he wants to make is by the time we're leaving the theater, half the people who saw it love it, and half the people who saw it can't stand it. Because it creates conversation.
All right, so moving on. Next thing that I really liked was after. Well, actually, it's twofold. I like the supremacy. In fact, I love the supremacy.
Visually, it looks cool.
Visually, it is awesome.
Now,
its entrance is awesome.
Now, I'm gonna skip ahead here for a little bit.
Sure.
Did you hear from the latest? I saw on some Star Wars channel. I think it was Star Wars Coffee, or one of those, or it was like the Lore Master or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That he has it from a source at Lucasfilm, that prior to The Last Jedi, Snoke was intended to, in fact, be Darth Plagueis.
Oh, wow.
Like, so I just pictured Darth Plagueis on this big-ass, like, ship. And I was like, that's fucking awesome.
Well, I mean, if that's any level of true, then that's very disappointing, because that would have been a really cool thing that perhaps would have been a little too over the heads of the casual Star Wars fan. but it wouldn't have been any different than having more of a backstory for Palpatine. And even if you are a casual movies only fan and you felt like it, you could still go back for that information.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of the way the casual fans are with Snoke. They kept telling us it's like, oh, what do you care? Like nobody knew where Palpatine was from in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Completely taking away from the fact that an entire prequel trilogy was made.
It's intellectually dishonest.
It is very intellectually dishonest. Okay, so moving on from that. The introduction of the supremacy is awesome. And then Kylo's attack run with his new TIE, I believe at this point it's called the Whisperer, because even though it didn't blow up in The Last Jedi, he still got a different one for The Rise of Skywalker, but whatever. In particular, out of the 3 movies, I think that Kylo's TIE fighter in The Last Jedi is the best one. I think that the aesthetic cues that are made to look ever so slightly like homages to the Falcon are really cool, like the rear engine section. And then the way that the modified front cockpit, there's quite a few aesthetic things about the TIE Whisperer that I was really into.
Calamity's being a pain in the butt again.
Knocking toys off the table.
She might go for your wall, Ed.
Really?
She might. No,
Oh, it's leather, right? Okay, so anyway, yeah, so Kylo's TIE fighter is awesome, and then the attack run where he flies down the tunnel in the MC-85 Mon Calamari cruiser, and then sends off the 2 rockets to blow up the hangar bay inside the MC-85. Awesome. I also think that it is hilarious that he tried spinning because that's a good trick.
Yeah.
And
of all the nods to the prequels, the sequel trilogy had, that might be the best.
That's why I can't completely hate Rian Johnson, because he did fit stuff like that into The Last Jedi, where I'm like, he tried spinning. That's a good trick. Like, I think I even said that in the theater.
Well, I mean, even before the movie came out, I was definitely Team Rian Johnson because he was on Twitter defending the prequels.
I will give you one better. I actually listened to an older episode earlier today where we were talking about all these reports of Rian Johnson bringing in the Last Jedi ahead of schedule and under budget, and we were we were sucking his dick pretty hard. It was kind of crazy to hear.
Well, yeah, we were all very positive about him. Because I was a big fan of Brick before I heard anything about him doing the Last Jedi. I had been a big fan of Brick for a while, and that's a pretty weird movie. You know, it's like a noir high school drug dealer movie. It's strange.
It's kind of weird though how Disney was kind of like everyone on the end in Disney and Lucasfilm. The way they were talking about The Last Jedi prior, like in a post Episode 7 world, but in a pre Last Jedi world, it was kind of Sithy. Whereas like they were telling the truth, but from a certain point of view, kind of thing.
For sure.
Like I remember after Episode 8 wrapped filming, and Abrams basically knew what was going to happen in it. Abrams said, "I wish I had made this made Episode 8." Now, at the time, we all took that as like him being very excited and for this movie, and him saying, "Oh man, this is going to be so good, and I'm so excited for it that I wish I had a bit more involvement in it." Not knowing that at the time he was saying that this is going to be a stinker, guys. I wish I had done it.
Oh, I mean the Hollywood spin was on absolutely full display.
And then Kathleen Kennedy giving Rian Johnson his trilogy. That's probably never going to happen, but still, he gave him his trilogy. She gave him his trilogy, and we kind of overlooked the reason. The reason was not because the movie was good. It was because he finished it on time and he finished it under budget.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on. The next thing that I like in The Last Jedi, I think that Rey's training outfit is cool. It's basically a sleeveless girl version of the Luke Bespin outfit. Took me a while to notice that, but I like it. I just think it's cool. I like the shoulder pads. I like the arm wraps. I just think it's neat.
Well, that's the thing is that like in the whole training, it's hard to ignore Luke being a crotchety old fart. But if you ignore that, which is hard to do, there's some cool stuff on Octo. There is the wisping voice that says, "There is no passion, there is peace," and Rey looks over. That's the old Jedi code. There is Luke calling Darth Sidious by name.
Yep.
That's cool. So, I mean, there's some lore nods that are kind of cool. It's just Luke.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, that folds perfectly into my very next point about what I like. I like Rey's interaction with Grumpy Luke. The second point that's kind of within that is I also like Grumpy Luke and R2 and the Falcon to the degree that it made me tear up. The only
R2?
time
he says R2.
The only time that I physically reacted where I got a little choked up was when Luke looked up from sitting in the Falcon, what he thought was alone, noticing R2 and then saying it with the upward inflection of it sounded just like when he first landed on Dagobah and R2 had fallen off of the wing of the X-Wing and gone under the water, and he said his name the first time before he yelled it the second time. The tone, everything about Mark Hamill sounded like his 25-year-old self again in that moment, and it almost made me burst into tears in the theater. And then when R2 decided to play Leia's message to Obi-Wan from A New Hope, which I kind of saw coming, but again was just great.
Did that give you hope for the rest of the movie, or was it?
Yes, it gave me a temporary boost of hope for the remainder of the movie. Now, once again, I do have to admit that I was dealing with having gone on Star Wars leaks very early in the process, which if you've listened to the Emperor Experience at all in the past, you know that out of the three people on this team, that I'm probably the most engrossed in the Star Wars leaks all the way through the process.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff can be ambivalent sometimes, but he's willing to listen to me bitch and moan. And Kevin is usually the one who abstains from any kind of leaks up to and including not even watching previews.
I think the exception was The Rise of Skywalker. I think we all wanted to know what the fuck was going on there.
More or less.
Yeah, no, it's funny. The Last Jedi is one of the last movies I ever did that for. I think I did it for Endgame, and that might be it. I think that was like, but The Last Jedi was one of the last movies I was really big on abstaining for. And by the time the leaks for the trailers for Rise of Skywalker came out, I was just so kind of numb that I was soaking up everything. I was key on the Snoke clones, and I was like, oh man, this can't be real. They're just making shit up at this point.
So once again, despite the fact that he was grumpy Jake Skywatcher, I still think that during the times that he and Daisy were interacting on screen, that they had good chemistry, which just breaks my heart even more that they couldn't have done more with that pairing had they made different choices artistically.
Now, the issue with Grumpy Luke is that Luke's trying to echo Yoda's role in Empire Strikes Back, the exiled old master who the hero must go seek out for training, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Yoda in Episode 5 has a sense of like, sort of like, I wouldn't say he's grumpy, but he's definitely humbled. You know what I mean? He's legit on a planet, and he's been living there in total isolation for over a decade.
Yes, one of my favorite things to berate prequel haters about is their absolutely moronic stance that there is somehow a flaw in George's storytelling, because when we first meet Yoda and Luke mistaking the Yoda character for just a little goblin in the woods that is going to help him find Yoda, the great warrior, when Yoda says wars not make one great, how anybody who knows that the original trilogy came out before the prequels are set canonically after the prequels, because that's what prequels meant, that they could say that somehow Yoda's statement was hypocritical because he used a lightsaber in episode 2, or they think him using a lightsaber in episode 2 is stupid because he says wars not make one great in episode 5. Generally, when people make comments like that, I tune them out as far as Star Wars fans are concerned. Like, I'll still talk to them about, other stuff like sports and weather, but I literally won't have a conversation with you about Star Wars anymore because you've proven that you're just too ignorant to follow me on any point that I'm trying to make anyway.
But that's the point, is that Yoda's arc as the great warrior in the prequels ended in failure, and Darth Sidious overtaking the Republic. Luke's arc as the warrior in episode in the OT, he won. Like, the Empire was overthrown, and he redeemed his dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't quite get how you could go from that to him being old and grumpy, and you use a few quick scenes, which is again supposed to be massaging the certain point of view trope in the Star Wars. It's silly.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. Okay, so we're still on things that I like, so we're not going to get negative yet, but it's hard not to sometimes. Things that I like. I like porgs. Fight me.
I don't care.
I
I'm
like the caretaker Ninja Turtle ladies. Doesn't bother me one bit. I just think that it's another type of alien that lives in the Star Wars universe, and that's okay with me.
See, here's the thing, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one creature that I liked in this movie, from a visual standpoint, were the crystal foxes on Crate.
Yes, I did like the crystal foxes.
Like, when I think like the first ever Jedi temple and like all this like lore and Force stuff is on there, I don't think giant frog nun ladies. I just don't. I think there's got, like, I don't know. I just think that something more mystical should be on the planet other than giant frog nun ladies.
Okay, well, that's fair. That's why we're having a conversation. Yeah. I like the Jedi Temple on Ahch-To, minus the yin-yang symbol on the floor, because that, I believe, falls into the misrepresentation of what the new Lucasfilm people are considering the balance of the Force, and which seems to me to be much closer to what George Lucas was afraid of when he sold Star Wars to Disney, which was the Force turning into what he called gobbledygook. And I think that the Freddie Prinze Jr. explanation of how balance in the Force works, if that's what he believes the balance in the Force is, and he believes that he got that information from a reliable source at Lucasfilm. Now, he claims it's from George himself. I think he's been hit in the head too many times. But if he believes that's what balance in the Force means, it's very simplistic. It is extremely corny, and it's frankly wrong.
What's so stupid, though, is that, like, what good aspects, like, because it's supposed to be, like, balancing the good of the light and the good of the dark. What aspects of the dark are good? Greed, lust, megalomaniac. But,
yeah, in the real world, those are all associated with the deadly sins from, standard Christianity. It's like they're all negative things.
Like, what aspect of being selfish in your powers, which is what the dark side is is conducive to a balanced lifestyle or balanced anything.
Nothing. And
Yeah.
that's why balance is not how they're describing it. Balance is the suppression of the dark side and the understanding that even though it does exist, it doesn't overwhelm us. That's
Yeah.
where the Jedi are. The Jedi are the ones who hold the line so that the common person is not overwhelmed by the dark side, no matter who's wielding it or manifesting it at the time. Anyway, I think the updated AT-ATs are cool. I think that the Death Star tech, just in general, whether it's being used on the Dreadnought for a cannon or whether it's being used for the bunker buster on the Battle of Crate, I just like that idea. I like the idea of the old Rebel base as the place where the Resistance is making their last stand.
I don't like it. It's just not Hoth. Like the second I saw that, I was like, okay, this is not Hoth.
Absolutely, the same way that the Episode 7 Rebel base is not Yavin.
Yeah.
Crate is not Hoth.
Yeah.
And the fact that they had to do a little expository scene where a random extra licks the ground and then turns to Gareth Edwards, who was the director of Rogue One, and has to say, "It's salt," so that you know it's not snow. Was kind of dumb. Moving on. I like the Rebel airspeeders. I wasn't too keen on them being so rickety that Poe kicked the floorboard out. That seemed a little over the top. But I did like the design. I thought it was sort of... it had kind of a B-wing aesthetic. So you could see how that style of cockpit fuselage design could be manifested in both a spacefaring vessel and in this case as an airspeeder type machine. So the T-47 was basically just like sort of a delta shape, but fleshed out a little bit. The Rebel airspeeder on Crate has sort of an open air. It's basically Luke's land speeder mixed with a B-wing.
Yeah.
I guess if I was going to put anything on it. So I just thought they were cool. Okay. Now this is one that needs to be fleshed out in my dislikes, but as far as my likes are concerned, I like that Luke used the Force projection to delay the First Order advancing on the Resistance.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I do not like that he died.
Mm-hmm.
I do not like that he died from the effort because he's supposed to be the most powerful Jedi Master in the universe. I do not like that it appears he did the Force projection because he was still unwilling to be there in person. And then, of course, if anybody was making the argument that he did the projection because his X-Wing wouldn't make it, well, if you've seen Episode 9, I'm more than willing to take your apology letters on my Facebook, my Instagram. I have 2 separate emails.
I can give you his address if you want to hand deliver a note
to
him.
If you want to handwrite me an apology letter because you thought that was a possibility, and now that you know that you're wrong and you owe me an apology, I'm willing to accept it.
Now, what I don't like about that, I don't like how Kylo Ren says everyone, like how he's like everyone fire at Luke, and then when the dust settles, Luke's there totally unscathed and just goes.
Yes,
it's like
the brushing the shoulder off was too real world.
It's not even that. It's there's a guy on YouTube whose channel is named Anomaly, and he does this intro that mocks the Disney movies where he has Goku going Super Saiyan 3, like going, behind all the crazy fucking force powers that are introduced in the Disney trilogy, implying that it's so over the top and dumb now. And the part of the Disney movies that's the most like Dragon Ball Z is there's so many times in Dragon Ball Z where a character fires a blast at someone and the dust settles, and the character who received the blast is totally unscathed. It's like, whoa, that didn't do anything, or that tickled. Or it's stupid. It's like if I want to watch Dragon Ball Z, I'll watch Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, you make a good point there. And I
also like the thing you've done is impressive. Like that's so cool. We're on your side. You're Luke Skywalker. We want to like you.
Yeah.
You got it. The fact that you had to try so hard to get us to not like you is a testament to how much you're liked. We had to create a fake other character for you to be just so that we could still like Luke the same. That's the level of devotion you have. You don't need to brush your shoulder all cool like you really don't need to do anything. All you got to do is just stand there.
Yep. Yeah. If
also, stand there and have a green fucking lightsaber. I'm not going to.
If he had stood there in stoic silence with just his hands down, that would have been awesome. Now, as far as the blue lightsaber, green lightsaber thing, interesting that you point that out because that was the thing that annoyed me as well. But Joseph Scrimshaw explained it where if you accept Rian Johnson's story for what it is, the point that he was trying to make by having Luke project himself with the blue lightsaber was Luke accepting the hero's call again.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can follow without cringing the idea that when Daisy first hands Luke his lightsaber, he rejects it by throwing it. The second time that she presents it to him, it was after she got done hitting him in the back of the head with her staff, and then attacking him with the lightsaber, and then turning the lightsaber off and handing it to him, at which point he rejected it again, at which point she says, well, maybe Ben will accept it, and then she goes off and he stands on the rock while the Falcon flies away, and then that's when he goes and meditates and reconnects with the Force and reconnects with Leia and that whole thing. So I like that Luke did what was at that point the most amazing thing that a Jedi can do, while at the same time maintaining what is essentially the pacifist stance that he took, starting with throwing his lightsaber down in front of the Emperor. I won't turn to the dark side. You'll be forced to kill me. Mm-hmm. So be it. And then Vader has to come to Luke's rescue because Luke wasn't willing to kill his father to join Palpatine, nor was he willing to turn to the dark side in any capacity. So
there's a weird misinterpretation of the Jedi way in the Disney trilogy where, like, the Jedi fucked shit up in the prequels. And granted, the Jedi were somewhat flawed in the prequels, but, like, I think Qui-Gon is, like, pretty much the epitome of what the Jedi should be in the prequels. And there's one scene where, in the Phantom Menace, where the Bowser was like, "Oh wait, you're under arrest," and Qui-Gon just fucking slices that motherfucker.
Yes, yeah, and I remember when I was a teenager, very specifically saying to myself that it was a good idea that they chose the bad guys to be droids, because it would have been really gnarly to watch Jedis constantly hacking people's limbs off and cutting people in half. That would have been really gnarly.
After a while, I'd start to ask who the bad guys are. Like,
exactly.
Wow,
exactly.
This is awful.
Cutting up droids makes it a lot easier to swallow than then, like, cutting dudes from the hip to the shoulder and
Yeah.
watching
All
like
the you
their
know now that
whole
I'm
upper
thinking about
bodies
it,
flying
Yeah,
off.
all that bullshit about we need clones because they're a little bit more advanced than droids. No, we just need to make it clear that we're the good guys and these guys are butchering a lot of people. Like these guys are droids. We've got bodies back there, just
Yeah,
bodies piling up.
they were just pretty smart. Okay, so
Watch out for Calamity.
I
She's
see
gonna
it.
turn off the computer.
I also was a big fan of the Falcon chase through the canyon on Crate when specifically the Millennium Falcon chase music was used that was initially used in the asteroid field chase in Empire Strikes Back. I thought that the inclusion of that music was perfect. And even though I wasn't as keen on the circumstances of the crate battle, I still think, again, like I said, certain elements of it were really cool. And I thought that when the Falcon shows up and then gets the TIE fighters to chase him, and then they go down into the red crystal canyon, and then they pop out, and I just thought it was neat. And then the final thing that I enjoyed about the Last Jedi.
Calamity's getting all cozy.
Yeah. The last thing that I enjoyed about it was that, at least until he was knocked off of his trajectory to take out the bunker buster, that Finn was choosing self-sacrifice to save his friends. I thought that was an admirable end to a character that had a pretty interesting run in the first movie. We'll get to why I think Finn could have been used differently in The Last Jedi compared to where he ended up at the conclusion of The Force Awakens. But I thought the fact that he thought he could save his friends by slamming into that bunker buster and sacrificing himself. Had he accomplished that, I would have been satisfied with his character arc, and I would have thought that it was a cool way to end a character that, although we hoped for more from him at the beginning, especially with the initial poster having him holding the lightsaber and stuff, I think that him sacrificing himself for his new friends in the Resistance to help save them during their last stand against the First Order, his former, shall we say, employers, would have been a cool way to do it. But then, of course, Rose thought otherwise, and we got the movie we got.
Saving what we love. I love,
yeah. So she was.
If there's one thing I would ask Ryan Johnson about, I was like, you're aware that she says saving what we love, and right behind her, the First Order is blowing the door up to go murder all your friends, right?
The door exploded right as they were kissing.
But still, it's basically the same effect, man.
I understand. Okay, so dislikes.
Here we go. Here we go. Dislikes.
Oh, shit.
Dislike number one.
Oh man, I'm so.
This is the crux of my problem with The Last Jedi. There's a lot of things about The Last Jedi I could forgive if Luke Skywalker's story had not been treated the way it was treated in this movie. So Luke's story, his character motivation, his backstory with Kylo, and the fact that his projection killed him. I don't care about the fact that earlier in the movie, when Kylo was first force Skyping with Rey, that he mistakenly thought she was projecting to him, at which point he said, "You can't do that. The effort would kill you." Okay, there's some solid foreshadowing. So we come to find out that the force projection evidently takes a lot of effort. And even though Luke is the most powerful Jedi in the universe, and he's been practicing at being a Jedi Master for the better part of 30 years, somehow this singular effort to project himself across time and space to create kills him. Nobody knows why. It's simply the effort killed him. So
that would be like,
I got a problem with that.
Like,
are you not going to talk about the fact that apparently he's disabled in heaven because his arm went with him?
Oh yeah. When he disappeared and his metal
there's
hand,
no thunk.
his metal hand apparently disappeared into the cosmic force.
There's that line from there's this episode of Family Guy where the characters go to heaven and Joe is still in a wheelchair and God's like, "Oh yeah, you're like this forever."
Oh,
See, now I could live with Luke dying if it wasn't a bad death. Like if somehow Luke and Snoke have like a face off, and Snoke reveals that he's Darth Plagueis, and they have an epic fight, and at the end, Snoke / Darth Plagueis kills Luke like Darth Maul did to Qui-Gon Jinn. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, like the ninny that that Rian Johnson had working with him.
Yeah,
the guy who in the director and the Jedi extra material said that Mark Hamill had to learn to get over the fact that he wasn't the Luke Skywalker from the original trilogy. In this movie, he didn't call him Obi-Wan, he just called him Obi. So that's how you know he's not a real fan, because nobody calls Obi-Wan Kenobi Obi by itself.
We're not his friends. We're not his friends.
Yeah, for realsies. That guy does not know his Star Wars, because nobody calls Obi-Wan Obi.
That guy's like some weird, like I feel like so many people who are in like the upper echelons of Hollywood and like Disney are people who were raised in like these communist fucking pockets of like the West Coast.
Okay. All right, Jeff.
There's now these like weird corporate.
No, we're not doing that.
All I know is that the guy had a little mustache and he's got some sort of European accent that I'm not okay with.
He's got some kind of.
And Obi-Wan's name is Obi-Wan.
Hey, do you want to know why I just clapped? So I can see in the audio file where the fuck I gotta go in and just excise this poison from the episode. So thanks, you toxic Avengers.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. Second thing I got a problem with. Leia Poppins.
It's another Dragon Ball Z Force power.
You're gonna have to actually explain this one to me, just because I that's one of the few things that I still don't fail to have that big a problem with.
Okay, on a technical level, when she got blasted out of the ship and into space, the debris of which she was included should have stayed where they were, and all of the ships should have kept moving. There was absolutely not enough time for that action to happen, and then for her to come to and then use the Force to A, prevent her lungs from collapsing while she was in zero gravity, and 2, to fly back to the MC-85 where she could be pulled back in and put into a med bay before all of the ships would have just flown past her. So that's number one, all right? On a technical level, the whole space chase would have gone on without her had they actually maintained the action sequence in real time. The second thing is that we've encountered people getting blown out into space in Star Wars before. They don't do well. And again, I know we're dealing with space fantasy and not science fiction. I know we're dealing with space wizards and it's not Star Trek, because Star Trek is much more, expository. They explain a lot more. They take in real world science into account much more. Star Wars doesn't and doesn't have to. So in that regard, I understand. But the fact that there was no mention of Leia having any Force abilities that had been cultivated in any particular way, and then suddenly for them to manifest with such an incredible effort that, frankly, for me, her ability to get back to the MC-85 and do it and live is a more amazing feat of using the Force than Luke's Force projection later in the movie, which I just think is a miscalculation on the part of the movie creator.
Now, I remember seeing that for the first time, and I remember liking it for the first time. Okay. Obviously, subsequent viewings, I no longer like it. However, the first time I saw it, I just saw Leia using the Force, and I thought that was cool. Because in every prior movie, we never saw Leia using the Force. And actually, one of the big letdowns of The Force Awakens was Leia, because she wasn't a Jedi. She was a dumpy old lady in a Walmart greeter outfit. Like, I wanted to see Leia with a lightsaber, and I wanted to see her use the Force, because Luke says in Episode 6, you will learn to use these powers as I have, or something to that effect.
Exactly. And I also didn't want her to age from 1970. I wanted her to look exactly the same.
Oh, shut up, Kev. You know what I mean.
I'm just saying, people get old, Jeff. We're not like you, and we're going to live to 107 and look exactly the same.
Give her a fucking Jedi robe and a fucking lightsaber, all right? Seriously.
Now that Jedi robe Leia, I'm 100% down for.
Yeah,
that would have been cool.
Way more into Jedi robe Leia than I am into Walmart greeter Leia, for sure. All right, moving on.
Her sleeves were an awkward length, now that I think about it.
Admiral Gender Studies. Okay. So
I remember, so Kev can vouch for this. When the second I saw her pop on screen, my fist tightened and my jaw clenched because I knew what they were doing.
No. I need to preface this. You grabbed me, and the bruise has not healed. My arm hurts when it rains. I think you shattered my wrist.
All right, so let me get into some details. Like I said last week, I do not think that it should be a requirement for you to have to read all of the supplementary material, like the Journey to series, in order to enjoy these movies to their fullest. Now, as it happens, I did try to follow as much of the supplementary material as I could. And one of the books that I read leading up to The Last Jedi was the Leia Jr. novel. The book was actually really good. One of the things that it does is it develops the initial relationship between Leia as a junior senator when she was literally still a teenager, where she meets Amilyn Holdo, who, when they were both teenagers, as you might assume, a woman in her 50s wearing a purple ball gown and having purple hair might be a little wacky when she was a teenager. So Holdo was written as such, and she's supposed to... They basically wrote her as, like, a hippie. Like, the kind of girl who, like, goes to Coachella every year. Like, that's the kind of character that Holdo was written as.
Vanessa Hudgens in space.
Basically. And then I guess the planet that she's from is very proper. Like, literally everybody's got a Johnny Unitas crew cut, and all the women have their hair in a bun. It's like, you know, Planet Amish or something. So the idea of her wearing the kind of ostentatious outfits and having her hair dyed purple is supposed to be her, like, really showing her individual spirit or something. I guess she was living her truth.
She's a reflection of every fucking corporate commie you see at Apple, Disney, and all those other big tech companies.
Well, that's why I refer to her as Admiral Gender Studies, and I have a big problem with her, specifically because, obviously not because she's a woman. That's stupid, okay? And I like Laura Dern. I've always liked Laura Dern.
I saw Laura Dern for the first time in October Sky, a movie about kids in, like, Kansas or wherever learning to fly rockets.
Oh, I remember that movie.
Yeah. And ever since then, I've had a massive crush on her. So I cannot hold that same vigorous hatred
I think
that
the first time I
Jeff
saw her was
has.
in Jurassic Park.
See, and that was the thing that was so baffling to me is that, like, in the first weeks after The Last Jedi, everyone was saying how much they hated Rose. I'm like, Rose was fucking just this ineffectual character.
No, Rose was worse, man.
Weird, malicious piece of crap.
Yeah.
Rose was worse, man. I'm never
she's
gonna.
not. Rose is
No.
just,
Rose is not worse, dude.
listen.
No, she's worse because she single-handedly robbed Finn of his shining moment.
If I saw Kelly Marie Tran, I would shake her hand and I would say, "You seem like a nice lady, and I am very sorry that you were handed a poor character to portray in the Disney Star Wars series."
And then she would say, "How dare you for touching me? We're living in the era of COVID-19. You may have killed us both."
Also, get out of my apartment for the love of God. I'm scared of you, and it's in the middle of the night.
How did you get in my window?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Did you leap?
Yeah. All right. So the next thing about Admiral Gender Studies that I have an issue with is, regardless of how military protocol might go, so whether or not the urban acolyte ever hears this broadcast, dude, I don't care that you are in the Navy. I don't. And if the guy from Hello Greedo, who wears the Stormtrooper helmet all the time, hears this, hey, guess what? I don't care that you were in the Navy either. All right, you sat on a boat for 4 years and you took my tax money. You don't get to tell me how Star Wars movies work.
The Beebs.
So
I wish you had the Beebs to comment. I wish you could get the Beebs.
Should I call in Sean and have him comment on the Navy? Hey, our uncle was in the Navy for many years. We like the Navy. Sean doesn't like the Navy anymore. But I like the Navy. You can't be a Marine and like the Navy. He's dating a naval nurse, and he still doesn't like the Navy.
I'm sure he kept that boat very clean. Listen,
dude,
the chain of command and the military protocol thing aside, the fact that a slow speed chase was made even more boring by the fact that the incumbent leader decided that she was going to keep the plan secret for reasons. Like, she didn't even say that's operational security or anything. She didn't even use a word to describe it. She just demanded it.
Well, see, and here's the thing. This is that weird authoritarian SJW stuff that's starting to seep in. Because I remember shortly after that movie came out, I went to New York City on a date with some random girl. And we were talking about this movie, and she was all into she was a hardcore feminist, and she loved Holdo. And I remember just making a comment yeah, it would have made sense if she just told everyone her plan. She got up and she's like, oh my God, she doesn't have to. She's the boss, okay? I was like,
yeah, and we're talking about a Star Wars movie right now. So yeah, that's all you need
seriously,
to know.
But it's...
She wouldn't jeopize the mission, Jeff!
Yeah, shut up.
There was a mission!
Yeah, shut up. All I could think of at that time was unlimited power! Because that's what it is. It's someone jacking off on how fucking powerful they are. And that's not what the good guys do.
What if Holdo was a Palpatine?
Anyway, all right, listen. Let's keep moving.
Right.
So, Admiral Gender Studies was a problem on a variety of levels for me, not the least of which was she just doesn't fit in Star Wars. She didn't fit as a character in Star Wars. I understand that the aesthetic was meant to be perhaps some sort of an homage to Mon Mothma, because Mon Mothma wore kind of flowing robes from her home planet of Chandrilla, and Mon Mothma was very feminine, even though she had a short haircut. She had a very motherly vibe to her, for lack of a better word. Admiral Gender Studies, I think, was meant to elicit that, but obviously in a much more updated, modern, however you want to call it, fashion. Postmodern fashion.
And one last word on this. I love how these intellectually dishonest people are trying to say that there was never a female in authority in Star Wars, when in Empire Strikes Back, the movie that The Last Jedi is the not version of, you have Leia in the opening scenes calmly giving commands to a bunch of male fighter pilots, and they're all listening to her.
Yeah, they're having a completely open and transparent dialogue.
Yeah.
There's even pilots who question what she's saying, and she answers them, and then they go, "Oh, okay."
And there's even a scene in the prequels where Anakin is protecting Padme on Naboo, and Anakin tries to like make some like assertion over Padme, and Padme is like, "Whoa, back off, dude! I'm from this planet. I know what I'm doing." Like, so the fact that they felt like Holdo was even needed to somehow put mansplainers in their place. Have you ever watched a Star Wars movie before?
Yeah, exactly. Like if it was meant to reinforce a point that the filmmakers thought hadn't been brought up in Star Wars before, I could understand that. The fact that these are things that have been much more artfully dealt with in previous Star Wars movies makes it even more ham-fisted and easier to spot.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Sorry.
Probably the biggest thing outside of Luke that bothered me is the Marvel humor.
Yeah.
Right off the bat,
General Hugs.
The opening sequence of Poe attacking the Dreadnought, which I really enjoyed, was more or less soured by his initial conversation with the bridge of the Star Destroyer. When he does that, not hearing you, the drive-through at McDonald's box isn't working joke, that was really bad.
Yeah.
It was really, really bad. Now, I understand that the point of what they were doing was to buy time for Poe while his booster rocket charged up. It doesn't come off that well during the movie. And the final bit where he uses the "your mom" joke, that falls flat because on one level, it's a "your mom" joke. And a "your mom" joke hasn't been funny since like 1997. I think the only "your mom" jokes that are funny nowadays are if you watch Screen Crush, when you watch the Easter egg videos, whenever they follow up an episode of The Mandalorian or Clone Wars, the host of the show, Ryan Airy, always makes one of the details a joke by saying, like, "You see this character in the background here? That's your mom." That's the only funny "your mom" joke I've heard in the last 20 years. He does it every episode. He always sneaks it in. It's really funny. He's a very knowledgeable Star Wars fan. So if you like Star Wars, the YouTube channel Screen Crush, they know what they're talking about. Just to put it out there.
I just so many options in Star Wars. That's actually really good.
So just terrible Marvel humor doesn't fit in Star Wars. Star Wars is much more subtle. I think that the style of humor that you get from Marvel creates a break in your suspension of disbelief, because one of the things about Star Wars is that it sucks you in.
Yeah.
You know, you start watching the movie and it pulls you into the story. You know, it's very engrossing. Mm-hmm. Star Wars is not the kind of movie where I can disengage and like walk into the kitchen and get a cup of coffee and come back. If I'm watching the movie, I'm watching the movie. And whenever I do, inevitably, I always end up picking up something that, even though I've watched these movies hundreds, in some cases thousands of times, there's always some little detail or something that I notice.
Even having Empire,
it always rewards you to pay attention.
Dude, even having Empire in the background, I picked up on something where Luke is doing the Vader apparition in the cave in Dagobah,
mm-hmm.
and he chops the head off, mm-hmm. and the head tumbles, and you see Luke and Luke's face appears.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially showing that, essentially showing Luke's fears of becoming like Vader.
Yep.
Note that he chops Vader's head off very similar to how Anakin chops Dooku's head off in episode 3, and that contributed to his fall to the dark side. Just all these details, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So
anyway, sorry.
So again, Marvel humor, that type of comic book humor, I don't feel as a longtime hardcore Star Wars fan to fit in Star Wars movies. I don't care that it's because Disney owns them. I don't care if it's the kind of humor that the kids like nowadays. These movies are supposed to be timeless. So when you have dated humor or humor that will be dated sooner than later, it kills the rest of the movie. And one of the things about the original trilogy is that these movies are classic because there's nothing about the late 70s or early 80s other than some haircuts that make you realize what era you're watching in terms of when the movie was made.
Even the prequels. Especially the Phantom Menace, they've all aged very well.
Yeah.
Bad
Marvel humor is just one of the many factors that is going to make the Disney trilogy age poorly. And I think that it'll be sooner than later that people will look back on the Disney trilogy and just sort of like hold their head and wonder how it could have happened.
Well, the media's already started to turn on it. I really think honestly that the best attempt that Disney's done at Star Wars humor is the line in the final episode of The Mandalorian, or the second to last, where they go back to the Imperial base, and the Mandalorian looks at what's the head of the Bounty Hunter Guild's name again? Greef
Kargas.
Yeah. The Mandalorian said, I thought you said there were only 3 stormtroopers, and he's like, yeah, well, it's like that's Star Wars humor.
Yeah, and that's like Western movie humor. But like, you told me there's only 3 guys at the gate. Yeah, well, there's 10.
Yeah.
that's funny on a level that in the course of the movie, it's that man-to-man gallows humor where you're riding into battle. You're already nervous because there's 3 guys with guns, and you're like, I thought you said there was 3. Yeah, well, there's 10. And anyway, So terrible Marvel humor has no place in a Star Wars movie, and it was used to a degree that I find just untenable. So
now I find that interesting, just because you've liked, Endgame, and that had, that's a lot of more serious, but had Marvel humor. So
but it's a Marvel movie, and those are comic book characters, and I don't have the same emotional attachment to them.
Also, I think Ed liked Endgame on the same level that he liked The Rise of Skywalker.
Kinda. Yeah,
you nearly had an emotional reaction when you saw Captain America pick up Mjolnir. So I think there was a little bit more bite to it.
Maybe, but there was some parts of The Rise of Skywalker that genuinely made me get emotional. Levels of emotion that I cannot deny, because whether the fan service was done well, or whether it was something that effectively had been retconned from The Last Jedi, which we're talking about right now, that I was really against. And when I saw what I believe to be its proper correction being made on film, I was just like, yeah, that's damn right. Especially the Luke stuff. And then, the final scene that basically rips off Endgame when Lando shows up with
the ships.
With all the ships.
All of them.
Yeah, if you like a ship,
even the Razor Crest.
I said this last week. If you like a ship in Star Wars, it's in there.
You might have to squint.
Yeah,
Razor
exactly.
Crest is in there.
The Razor Crest is in there. Not only is the Ghost in there, but 3 VCX 100s are there. So I don't know who the other 2 were, but either way,
Was the Phantom there though? Actually, yeah, it was. It had to have
was.
been.
They actually rendered some of the cartoon Resistance ships
Dude,
into 3D images, and they were in the battle.
I bet if you look hard enough, you could probably find fucking Dash Rendar's ship.
Yeah, there's a YT
Are
2400
you
in there.
serious?
Yeah.
I bet the fucking Rogue Shadow from the fucking Force Unleashed is in there too. Jesus Christ.
I bet there's a Yuzon Vong in there somewhere. They snuck in. They snuck in during the battle, and they're like, "Ooh, okay, let's try it." Stop it.
Anyway, moving on. So along with terrible Marvel humor, we already covered this basically because Admiral Gender Studies is the crux.
Is there a reason you're not saying Holdo or?
No, I just think Admiral Gender Studies is funny.
Yeah.
Is the shoehorned SJW culture.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kathleen Kennedy.
So,
sorry, I'm not going to do any ad hominem attacks. Sorry.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? I've said this in previous episodes. If for some reason you can watch Star Wars and the thing that you glom onto is that there's too many white men running around, you need to understand that when the movies were first made, they were made in England. They were made in England in the 70s when it was still full of white people. Okay? That's who they had standing around. The fact that the movies now have a much more diverse cast is obviously due to several factors, not the least of which is that, 40 years on from the creation of the first movie, the world has changed a lot. Demographics are different. Much more people are fans of Star Wars, so now you have people who are specifically seeking out opportunities to be in a Star Wars movie as opposed to a bunch of British guys who just got hired for a space movie.
Even in the prequels, though, it was like there was a lady of Indian descent who played the Queen in Episode 2.
Queen Jamila, yeah.
It's like there was no shortage of diversity in the prequels. So again, I'm wondering what the problem was. Like, why? I just don't understand.
Yeah, well, I think that folds into the whole idea of intellectual dishonesty because I think in the last 10 years, the idea of the prequels being just objectively bad because of all of the YouTube pundits who have made their quippy videos about it, that everybody has just universally panned the prequels, and therefore anything positive that they did just sort of falls by the wayside along all of the bad. I guess the egalitarian universe that George Lucas created was not good enough for them. So specifically in the scene where Poe is attempting to gain some more information about Holdo's plan, there's one scene in particular where he is literally the only male in a shot with about 8 people in it. There are 7 women standing around, either in some sort of a technical assignment or, they're on the bridge of...
Yeah, it feels like you're working at fucking Apple all of a sudden. It feels like
it's swung in the other direction to a degree where it's noticeable even if you don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't care. But when I look at the scene and I say, the only guy in that scene is Poe, I'm like, come on, guys. Really? Everybody on the command deck is a woman? Everybody on the command deck is a woman?
Well, a great example of how times changed, but George's commitment to creating good characters, regardless of what they looked like, remaining the same. Okay, look at Lando. Biggest criticism Lando gets is, he's a token minority. I think that's bullshit and a discredit to a phenomenal character in the history of sci-fi. But okay, all right, he's just a token. All right, a few decades later, we're going to take Shaft. We're going to give him a purple lightsaber, and he's going to be one of the coolest motherfuckers ever. And we're going to name him Mace Windu. no one talks about Mace Windu.
Oh, we'll see.
He's one of the coolest.
He's also the head of the Jedi Council, not Yoda.
Yeah, he like everyone's looking to him, and Yoda's just sort of sitting there, and he's like,
too. It's and Anakin even says, as wise as Master Yoda and as powerful as Master Windu. Like Mace Windu is known as like the powerhouse behind the Jedi Council.
He beat Sidious, and you know, there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not Sidious let him win so that he could be purposefully injured. Like, how much foresight did he have into the situation? I don't know. I think if he had killed Mace, he would have chalked that up as a win and figured out a way to make Anakin see that it was self-defense. The Jedi were trying to kill me because I'm trying to help you out. We should team up. And I don't have a scrotum face. So life's great for creamy Sheev. I
think at the moment when he was backed against the wall and he had his lightsaber knocked out of his hand and Mace was holding him at the tip of his lightsaber, had Anakin not shown up to disrupt what was going on there, I think that Mace was going to win that battle.
See,
I think in that moment, she was able to make one last bid to manipulate the situation, and it was just enough. And that's why my favorite thing in the world is when I watch the watch-along of the original Popcorn Talk Jedi Alliance watch-along of Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. At the moment when Sheev blasts Mace out the window and then he falls backwards and his head goes back and his mouth is hanging open, Joseph Scrimshaw goes, I did it.
See?
And it's just the most perfectly timed joke.
I saved the world.
In characters like Lando or Mace Windu is that they're the token minority. You're the racist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are the butt lickers.
Uno reverse card on you, sir, and or madam.
I don't care if I've made this point before. I don't care about having if you want to put a female protagonist in there, cool, do it. I love Jaina Solo, who is the protagonist of the new Jedi Order books, and I even thought it was cool that when I first heard the concept of Rey, I thought she was basically the recanonization of Jaina Solo. What I don't like is being talked down to or disrespected, and that's what I feel like the SJW agenda in these Disney movies do.
Yes,
it does.
Yeah, it is very heavy-handed, and and again, we've mentioned the term intellectual dishonesty several times already this episode, but the intellectual dishonesty that goes into trying to make people like Jeff and me feel like bad people for not accepting these movies when what we have are genuine criticisms, and the people who are being intellectually dishonest simply keep just pointing at a whiteboard and moaning like zombies while they point at the word racism and sexism, and with their other zombie hand they point at us and they just go
also diversity is written twice on the whiteboard for some reason.
Yeah, that was a little much for me too. So moving on, the death of Admiral Akbar during the battle when Kylo can't decide whether or not he wants to kill his mom, so he lets one of his squad mates do it. Mm-hmm. Admiral Akbar being blown out into space and not recovering and only getting a brief mention in the meeting afterwards, I feel was an absolutely low-class move to eliminate a beloved character, specifically so that they would have less of an issue bringing in Admiral Gender Studies, just in case there was somebody on the Lucasfilm staff who still knew a little bit about canon and would have said, well, guys, if Leia's not in command, then it should be Admiral Akbar, so... And apparently that gave Rian Johnson the idea to just blow Admiral Akbar out the back window, too.
See?
Now, hold on. Normally, I wouldn't get that aggravated. because yes, Akbar technically is a secondary character. Some could make the argument that Akbar is not actually as beloved a character as he is because he's a meme and all that stuff. Okay, I get it. All I know is, as a little kid, I had Admiral Akbar as an action figure. I remember that I found his parts in Return of the Jedi to be very prominent. I always thought that his voice was really cool, and that's what made him seem important to me. And then starting with the meeting on the calamari cruiser, where all of the heroes get back together after escaping Jabba the Hutt, and Mon Mothma talking about the Bothan spies and stuff. As a little kid, I recognized Akbar as an important character.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I read more and I found out that his species were the people that were responsible for the Mon Calamari cruisers, which were the backbone of the Rebel fleet, made him even cooler to me.
Just to interject a little bit, I think seeing him be like looking the way he does in contrast to the enemy, it really gives you an idea of how welcoming the Rebel Alliance was and how it was really everyone against this uniformity, because it's a big plot point in a lot of stories that the Empire was all about humanoid and more specifically human representation, no aliens. There was a lot of racism. Thrawn getting as far as he did was insane. It was like crazy. People didn't believe that they let an alien rise to that kind of rank. And seeing this monstrous looking guy calmly with a stern voice giving military orders and directing troops and ordering rates of fire, there was something really cool about that, because like we love Chewie, but we can't understand him. He's just moaning and shooting shit.
Yep.
So that he did a lot. I think he did a lot for the ideas of Star Wars, that these aliens are not just set pieces. They're people that live in this galaxy far, far away, and they have something to say about the shit going on in it.
And you struck on a big point about these movies too, is that we're the fucking aliens. There's not a lot of aliens in these movies, man. There really
are. I didn't even think about that.
Moving on from that, on a personal note, if you don't know about the actual filming of The Last Jedi, one of the things that wasn't as well known until well after the movie was made was that the actual guy who does the voice work for Admiral Akbar, not furious, heartbroken, because they basically made his last day on set kind of a joke, and he was extremely distraught about that because he thought that he would have been given a little more respect for playing Admiral Akbar, knowing that Admiral Akbar's suit was basically going to get boxed up after that day during filming. And he said that when he found out that they wanted him to, clap the, what are the director, what's that thing called? The clap?
Action. Yeah, I don't know. Clapper maybe? That sounds stupid, but
call it a clapboard. When they made him do the clapboard and say, "It's a wrap," and then like everybody laughed, he apparently was like in tears inside of his suit, and then had to go back into his dressing room, and he just like sat and wept for a half hour.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the guy was crushed. He was absolutely crushed that his last day on set was basically kind of like they basically made a joke out of the meme of Admiral Akbar, and then just said like, "All right, thanks, peace."
Well, that's what I think. A lot of these guys at Disney are. They think there's someone. They think they're people who like the source material, but they're also people who feel like they're above everything, and they want to leave their own like pseudo intellectual kitschy humor stain on everything.
Yeah, and
anyway,
it puts a real
Sorry,
cramp.
we're getting frustrated. I do apologize.
It puts a real cramp in my ability to enjoy a movie with that kind of stuff going on. And then, of course, I liked Admiral Akbar as a character. I've liked him since I was a kid, and the fact that he got blown out into space, and then you find out that he died by the female lieutenant saying it in a speech before introducing Admiral Gender Studies. I just thought was real low
The
class.
fish is dead. Here is
So-
our new queen, who's not a fish.
In the comic retelling of The Last Jedi, he's given a bit more of a bit better of a send off. At what point when The Last Jedi came out do you think everyone at Lucasfilm was like, "We done fucked up"?
Here's the fucking dumb thing is that it's what they did was such a small little thing that really didn't amount to much. It's just he gets a word in and then he blows up. I think it's totally possible that was already on the books as like, oh, we're going to add a little bit more detail.
You think so?
Yeah, I think they don't give a shit. I think they don't give a shit. It's not like they're trying to placate people. They just don't care. And they're like, what'll sell more books? Oh, we'll give Akbar a line. That'll sell. This is in the gestation period. This is before anyone's even seen the freaking movie.
But also think about, obviously, they knew they pissed some people off because the Rise of Skywalker was a thing. We'll get to that next time.
Yeah, that's a whole separate issue. Okay, so moving on. Things I didn't like. Rose's entire character arc. Up to
it's just ineffectual. It's literally just ineffectual.
I'm so happy right now.
Hold on. Let's start with the fact. Let's start with the fact that we find her weeping in a back hallway because her sister got blown up on the terribly slow bombers that were attacking the dreadnought. So as unfortunate as it was to have her far hotter sister die on that bomber,
Jesus.
When she finds Finn, she goes from blowing snot bubbles and crying to doing the equivalent of a real world fangirl reaction to she acted like the real world equivalent of a person
seeing John Boyega
of a person at a Comic-Con meeting somebody that they've got to pay $60 to get an autograph of.
Also, Finn did that like 5 hours prior in real movie time.
Not to mention the fact that canonically Finn's actions are less than 12 hours old. So how much of a celebrity could he be based on the fact that she heard that he did this amazing thing 12 hours ago and she's still dealing with the death of her sister from a half hour before? So are you upset or are you excited to meet Finn? And then when she realizes that he's trying to run, which on one hand breaks his character arc because we thought we had already established that he had decided to fight for the good guys when he fought Kylo Ren, but apparently not. Apparently they were going to decide to restart his character arc over again in The Last Jedi for some reason.
Well, there's
and
a pretty
make him a coward.
There's a pretty racist movie trope about that too.
And Rose, almost like an Imperial, refers to him as a traitor and then takes it upon herself, even though there's absolutely nothing stating that members of the Resistance are required to stay on the ship. She decided that she was going to stun him and then take him to the brig.
At no point have I ever seen any member of the Resistance or Rebellion, for that matter, sign enlistment papers. They're not.
Well, we're watching The Empire Strikes Back. In the scene when Han tells General Reekin that he has to leave because he has to pay his debt to Jabba the Hutt, General Reekin says, "You're a good fighter, Solo. I hate to lose you."
And that's the thing; these SJW characters act like Imperials.
Yeah,
it's a really war. It's all in all the time, baby.
Because it's their way or the highway, and that's no way to live. So anyway, Rose's entire character arc, and the thing that bothers me the most about Rose, because we're not going to go too long on her, is this also ties into Finn's character arc being screwed up. Because halfway through the movie, during the Canto Bight sequence, We find ourselves on a balcony with Rose lecturing Finn about the horrors of rich people financing war. She's lecturing a child soldier who ran away from the people who kidnapped him and brainwashed him and forced him to be a soldier for his entire life. 12 hours later, she's got this poor fool standing on a balcony and she's lecturing him about the horrors of big business and capitalism and the military industrial complex.
Would that be womansplaining?
It very
Yes.
well, it very
Would that
well
be
could be.
womansplaining?
This is about, like, I think this is just, it just goes to show that they didn't really have any consciousness of the shelf life of the actions of the last movie, if that makes any sense. Like, there's no real frame of reference for the amount of time that passes.
Well, I also think that this is a perfect time that the less than a day time jump between the two movies is a bad idea.
Yeah.
You need the time in between so that if you see differences in what a character looks like, you can start to assume things, and then if expository dialogue pops along the way, where on Finn's haircut because his hair is longer, or somebody comments on, Poe having a scar on his cheek, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that was from the Battle of Tanab too." Whatever it is, that's much easier to fill in for a viewer than going from episode 7 happening on a Tuesday and episode 8 happening on a Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
It was just weird, and there was a lot of stuff that did not fall into place as a result, and this is one of them. So
Are we
the
not
next
going to go? Are we not going to go over the line?
which one?
The line from Rose that single-handedly, like, sort of torpedoed the last vestiges of my ability to give a shit.
Saving what we love.
Not fighting what we hate, saving what we love.
It was the movie that was the equivalent of receiving a cold splash of water on a movie I was unsure about, and suddenly all the flaws came crashing down right in front of my face.
And you can tell too that when they wrote that line, someone was like, "Man, that's deep, bro."
Not to mention the fact that kiss was so forced.
Yeah,
and
weird.
And if you watch, John Boyega looks horrified.
He probably was. See, that's the thing.
It almost looks like he didn't expect it.
See,
it almost looks like he didn't expect it in real life.
What kind of sucks about these movies, man, is that John Boyega, Kelly Marie Tran, and Adam Driver all seem like pretty nice people. It's just a shame that they got sucked into these shitty movies.
I think in particular, and this is not me as a white guy trying to sound cultured or something, I think in particular Kelly Marie Tran is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
They stuck her in a potato sack, and they gave her the worst haircut in the history of Asian women to be in this movie. The only thing that they could have done worse is if they gave her a bowl cut and made her wear false front teeth to look more Asian or something. I don't know how.
Throw her in a Yankees cap for good measure. Why not?
Exactly.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, and again, this is just to be funny, but let's remember that before she says the famous line, "Saving what we love," or "Not fighting what we hate, saving what we love," she had to turn around, fly past Finn. Now, granted, Finn may have slowed down because he was in the path of the preload of the gun.
There's force being exerted, yeah.
There was force being exerted, so maybe it was like an upstream salmon thing. And because she flew along the side, she was able to get past him, and that's how she was able to intersect him and crash into him. At the end of the day, an Asian woman crashed into him, and that's why he wasn't able to crash into the bunker buster.
Which, again, shows kind of how racist these people are, because, when George Lucas was writing Mace Windu, I don't think he once had in his mind that a fairly large, statured man of African American descent was playing him. He was just trying to write a good character.
Well,
You can
it's
tell
and it's
when they were
funny.
writing his characters, like Kevin, shut up.
Sorry.
When they were like, I'm gonna invoke Jerry from Music Gamer. They're probably like, oh my god, like, you know, if she's Asian, we gotta make her bad at driving. And if Finn's black, we gotta give him some whooping one-liner. Wouldn't that be cool, guys? Like, that's fucking racist. It's fucking racist.
I mean, I really don't think that's the conversation they had, but I think that they're so up their own ass that they didn't realize that by the end of the movie, they had an Asian woman crash a cowardly black guy. I mean, I don't even understand what these people are. They must have been doing crystal meth on set. So, moving on, the terrible bomber design makes no sense in Star Wars for a few reasons. The first of which is the outdated Y-Wing is faster and can unload its ordnance at a much higher rate than apparently the bombers that Paige Tico was on could. If you look at the very end of the sequence, when the one bomber that is remaining is actually able to get rid of its payload, when the payload distributes, the explosion that comes back from the dreadnought overwhelms and absolutely swallows up the bomber. So even if those bombers had all survived and none of the TIE fighters had crashed into them, none of them had been shot down, even if all the bombers had survived and made their run, they wouldn't have been able to complete their bombing run without being sucked into the explosion of the dreadnought. So no matter what, those goofballs were on a suicide mission. And somehow Poe still got blamed for all of them dying, when in actuality, the person who put them into the bombers and said, this is a good idea, should be fired.
Poe did this thinking, maybe if I have them, maybe if I'm the only survivor, we'll finally be able, Leia will finally approve the Y-Wing budget that I've been angling for years.
I'm just completely blown away that they thought that the homage to a World War II bomber somehow was the unique aspect of what they were doing, when in actuality they were giving us a design of a ship that was in effect older and worse than the ships that were used as bombers in not only Return of the Jedi, but Star Wars, A New Hope. In A New Hope, the bomber was the Y-Wing. In Return of the Jedi, the bomber was the B-Wing, and then there were still Y-Wings in the fleet. We went from having B-Wings to having ships that, if you read the extended canon, were used as crop dusters, now being brought back into service to do a bombing run on the biggest Star Destroyer that we've seen up to that point in canon, because 10 minutes later is when the Supremacy showed up. So up until this point, the Dreadnought is the biggest thing we've seen on screen, and they've got the slowest ship in the fleet dropping bombs over the top of it. So even if they had been successful and not lost any people during the approach, they would have lost everybody on the escape. They all would have gotten sucked into the flames. So it was just the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And that doesn't even involve the whole, are they magnetized? Are they not?
See, and that's the thing. By talking about fuel storage and stuff like that, you're inviting these criticisms too, because you're trying in a way to be more nuanced. So when someone tries to also take that approach and be more nuanced, you're saying, they say, well, ignore those nuances. Like, no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Now, you could you guys tell me if I had heard this theory and it made sense that the internal gravity of the ship allowed the bombs to drop, and then once it exited the ship, their forward motion carried them down.
Thing,
It's dumb, but I like that. That's what I was working with.
The thing that I read was that the bombs are magnetized and they're drawn down to the thing that they're targeted on.
You know what would have been cool?
So the idea of the bombs falling was in fact the bombs being drawn to the dreadnought because the dreadnought was the thing that it was magnetized to.
Well, that sounds awful.
You know what? Like you know what? To make that scene better, have droids pilot the bombers, and instead of the bombs go down, have them float around the ships, and then have them detonate, and then have the ships, and then have all the bombers explode over the dreadnought, and have the dreadnought be affected by some residual impact. I think that would be.
Or have Rey force choke the supremacy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, just literally anything.
Like she shoots all 3 TIE fighters in a row.
Yeah. So moving on. All right. So this is a big one, but I'll try to approach it reasonably. The entire Canto Bight sequence is a comedy of errors.
It's like you're watching Spaceballs.
Yeah. If you don't understand what the comedy of errors concept is, the same way that episode 9 is a wild MacGuffin chase, the Canto Bight sequence basically it unfurls step by step based on mistakes made. So the very first thing that Rose does when she shows up at what is the equivalent of Space Monaco is she crashes her ship on the beach,
which is also another bad driving thing.
Which is another terrible driver joke, which is hilarious. Included in the fact that although the joke about George Lucas and Ed Wood having this one common characteristic where they love to have shots of cars parking and ships parking, it works here. Okay, you could have taken a 1/10 of a second to have the ship park in some sort of a Canto Bight parking lot, docking bay 94 type scenario. And then that could have been your first opportunity for Rose and Finn to have to deal with the Canto Bight Security Corps. And they would have had to, say something slick to get by them while they were parking their ship.
And it could have been some callback to American Graffiti too, which is a George Lucas movie.
It very well could have made American Graffiti, connections in there. They could have done a lot of things, but instead they decided to make her crashing her ship on the beach the reason why they weren't able to get to the code breaker, because by the time they found the code breaker in the crowd, they had been spotted by the police because an Abendando, which is the new species that JJ brought into play for the Disney era of Star Wars, rats him out to the local police force as being the pilot of the ship that crashed on the beach, at which point they end up in the Canto Bight prison, or even though they're not able to get to the master codebreaker, somehow miraculously there is a stuttering Benicio del Toro who not only is a master codebreaker also, but also has the schematic to the supremacy. And when he breaks out with the help of BB-8 from prison, steals a ship, and then comes back to help Finn and Rose after they do their rescue of the space horses. Instead of saving the slave kids.
It felt good though, man, right? Hitting them back.
Felt good to tear that town up.
I'm like, no. But here's the thing. Here's what's funny about that. Like, hearing it said, like, if Rose had said that, yeah, but Finn said it. Finn, who had just directly contributed to the destruction of the single largest military base in history, he thinks it's a big deal that he freed some horses from some gamblers.
Oh, yeah, because 24 hours prior, he blew up Starkiller Base.
Help.
He just blew up Starkiller. Oh, dude, we're hitting him where it hurts. The horse racket.
Also, like,
point, Kev.
imagine if in episode 1, Qui-Gon went to Tatooine and he knows Anakin and he called Obi-Wan, like, hey, Obi-Wan, there's a kid here who's very powerful with the Force, but you know what? All these banthas are being held in captivity. It's not right. And he just comes back with like 5 banthas.
Yeah, exactly.
Palpatine goes up to Yoda while he's still undercover, says, Yoda, you're looking a little flabbier today. Goes over to Darth Tyrannus. It felt good, right? Hitting him back.
So anyway.
He just blew up Starkiller!
So, Canto Bight being a comedy of errors, it just didn't fit. Now, do I think the Canto Bight could have worked? Yes, I do.
Space casinos, like the idea of a casino in Star Wars is cool. Like
I think the Canto Bight could have been done right, but the fact that they chose to make it, as I've said now a dozen times, a comedy of errors does not fit narratively in a Star Wars movie. It took me out of it completely. It was way too silly. There are basic storytelling elements of a Star Wars movie that were completely ignored, specifically in the Canto Bight sequence, and it drove me nuts. Next thing.
It kind of reminds me of that season, those few episodes of Clone Wars where Obi-Wan has to fake his death and go undercover to infiltrate the criminal underworld. Like there's elements that you could put Star Wars characters into out there scenarios like Canto Bight and have it work.
Well, the Clone Wars did a brilliant job of introducing those types of storylines that you're talking about. Absolutely.
Dude, like there was even one episode of Clone Wars that was basically like a Godzilla type monster. A fucking monster movie.
It's a monster with lightsaber-proof scales that everyone just needs to find a way to kill.
Yeah.
Anyway, so moving on. So this is obviously we just in the background here at
the Emperor Studios.
At the Emperor Studios, we were watching The Empire Strikes Back, and the thing that kills, I think, all three of us with The Last Jedi is that even though Rian Johnson considers himself such an auteur, he still has to contend with the fact that he basically made The Empire Strikes Back in reverse and did it poorly. And one of the things he did the most poorly was that he decided that the way that he was going to employ the, as he might consider it, slow chase through the asteroid field because of the lack of hyperdrive being used, that he was going to make his new version of the slow asteroid chase be based around the consumption of fuel. Now, again, Jeff mentioned this earlier. Those are the types of things that up until this point, canonically, have not really been an issue in Star Wars. There's always enough fuel to get to places, etc., etc. Fuel consumption is much more a Star Trek, a sci-fi based thing. And it's not that talking about commodities and things like that aren't part of Star Wars. Obviously, they are, because politics and all of the stuff that goes along with that are talked about. If you know about the cutscenes where Biggs comes back to Tatooine and talks to Luke about how he's going to join the rebellion, and they're talking about how the Empire is basically absorbing all of the different guilds as it solidifies the Empire, and talking about how, in another year, Luke's uncle is just going to be a tenant slaving on a farm for the Empire and stuff. So they had all that stuff worked out early on, that government and politics and all of that stuff was going to be a major element in the storytelling of Star Wars. But they never took it to the specific point of having basically a car chase that was incumbent on fuel consumption. I mean, basically, we had the OJ chase in space.
Yeah.
and that's ridiculous. So, yeah, that was not the proper way to rip off The Empire Strikes Back. As far as the overall movie is concerned, I think that it is a soft reboot, but the self-effacing twist, the subversion of expectations, is not something that a Star Wars fan from day one is looking for.
It's a hollow attempt at trying to recreate I Am Your Father.
Yeah, there may be some newer fans who appreciated sort of the trying to branch out, trying to do something different, but all of those attempts basically just pulled me out of the movie over and over again. So
Yeah,
they did not work for
honestly,
me.
trying something different. Like, as much as I hate to say it, the Yuzhan Vong was trying something different in the old EU. I mean, yeah, was it the best thing? No, but like, I can appreciate it because, like, okay, they're trying to tell a new story.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Give me some force-proof Bugman now.
Yeah. So moving on.
Shut up, Kevin. You know what I'm saying.
Moving on. Rey's vague backstory is frustrating. I did not like the way that Rey and the finding out that she comes from nowhere was turned into such a unique thing. Because where does anyone come from? Where does Obi-Wan come from?
Where did Anakin come from?
Where did Anakin come from? Where did Plo Koon come from? Where did Sassy Tin come from? Where did Yerl Poof come from?
Where did Eth Koth come
Where
from?
did Eth Koth come from? Where did Mace Windu come from? These are all things that nobody needs to know, but we just accept. We accept without realizing it that the Force has nothing to do with bloodlines, and the only reason that people have made that argument is because obviously the main character in the Lucas Star Wars movies is Anakin Skywalker, and then the story transitions to be carried on by Luke Skywalker, his son, so everybody assumes that there's some sort of lineage-based Force thing that never existed, at least of which to George Lucas. Yeah. For those of you who are wondering, Obi-Wan is from the planet Stewjon.
An homage to Jon Stewart.
Yeah, and most people don't know that because it's one of the most boring planet names in the history of Star Wars that I think Lucas came up with on the fly when he was asked in an interview one time. So it's not really a big deal.
So now I do like... So I like Rey in theory being a nobody. I don't like, again, that they're trying to make something that was obvious about Star Wars as this like profound twist that we should have known all along when we did know it all along.
Being nobody is not profound.
Exactly.
When she went into the dark side cave and she asked to see who her parents were and the cave showed her herself, I was like, is she a clone? Is she...
That's what I thought it meant.
Does she asexually reproduce Rey's?
Like, that's them trying to do the not dark side cave on fucking Dagobah, where Luke cuts Vader's head off, and it's all of these things are corporate knockoffs of much more powerful scenes.
Yeah, it was that in particular was done very poorly for my taste, and it wasn't done any better in The Rise of Skywalker. When she goes into the Emperor's vault and then faces off with her with her sharp teeth vampire version of herself with the Pong Krell darkside lightsaber. So continuing with things that I don't like, I do not like that Supreme Leader Snoke got cut in half.
I don't like it even more now that he was supposed to be Darth Plagueis.
Here's the thing. So going down the list, I like Andy Serkis.
He's cool.
I liked how he was introduced in The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
I liked thinking about where his story might go in the next movie, and how.
Also, they did it. Also, they kind of like. It was kind of comical after when they zoomed in on his corpse and like fucking, and one eye was closed and his tongue was sticking out. Like,
Yeah, they definitely made too much of a joke of his bisected corpse, and the tongue hanging out definitely made it way more jokey than it needed to be. Because if it was a profound thing that the Supreme Leader had just been cut in half by Kylo Ren, you would think they would have treated it differently. But the next thing you see is the close up of his gnarly face with his tongue hanging out. So I was a big fan of Snoke. I liked his gold robes. I liked the fact that he was like 9 feet tall and he had all, a torn up face that apparently at one point had something to do with Luke Skywalker, but now I guess it's been retconned into nothing.
Like, I really think too,
The
like, if it's
lack
true
of
that he
any
was
plan.
supposed to be, I think if it's true that he was supposed to be Darth Plagueis, like, imagine how much more powerful that conversation in the opera house that Palpatine was having with Anakin would have been. Like, think about that. They're basically alluding to the bad guy at the conclusion of the saga
Mm-hmm.
in the conversation at the beginning of the saga. That's really cool. And again, it 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 would make the final trilogy feel more connected to the first two trilogies, which it doesn't.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I do agree with you. I think I'd need to hear a lot more before I was totally on board with it, but I'm definitely more on board than the idea of Palpatine just coming back. But we'll get there. All right, so Snoke got done dirty. Things I don't like. I do not like the Kylo helmet issue. Um, Ryan
I'm
Ryan
indifferent.
Ryan Johnson wanted him to have the helmet off so that he could use so that he could use Adam Driver more effectively as an actor, which I can understand. But the way that he went about it was obnoxious, and the fact that he made Kylo destroy his helmet in a rage, so that then we could have it come back into the story literally by having it dumped in a pile in front of a little monkey who welds it back together. But it's supposed to be special because he welds it and the welds look red so that it looks the way that this one particular type of Japanese art is, so that when you break a plate and you put it back together,
Oh yeah, you fill it
the
with gold.
the thing that you bind it with is gold, so that the breaks and the cracks in the plate are what make it artistically beautiful. I think that was a little too artsy fartsy for Star Wars, frankly.
But also, like, how do you even find the fucking thing? The separatists got bisected.
Yeah,
How the fuck?
he sent one of his goons to go
He's
back to
like,
that elevator that I crushed my helmet in and get all the pieces.
Marty,
Um,
listen, I was feeling a little hot and heavy in the elevator. I kind of want my helmet. So bring a
yeah, and then
dustbin, sweep it
so
up.
the fact that Snoke taunts him to take it off and then he smashes it. It's all.
Now, what's cool about that, though, I like the build up where Andy Serkis is like, "You were bested by a girl who never held a lightsaber. You failed!" And like, just like that was cool.
Yeah, and when he shot the force lightning through the floor, and
Yeah,
then it like angled up and hit Kylo Ren and sent him across the room, that was dope.
that
I
was cool.
actually think that scene did something a little problematic, and that it made
Don't
me
use that
wonder.
word, Ken.
It made me wonder why the hell this guy needs anybody. An army, I get. Why does he need Kylo Ren? This dude can do stuff with the Force that we've never seen Sidious do.
Well, based on the way that he spoke about General Hux earlier in the movie, you can assume safely that he probably has a particular opinion of Kylo Ren, and he's just keeping it close to the vest because he's getting what he needs from both of them. Because we do need to remember that one of the other things that Ryan Johnson made sure that we understood is that Kylo Ren and Snoke are not Sith, to the degree that once Kylo Ren kills Snoke, uh, he tells Rey that they should throw all of that stuff away. The Sith, the Jedi, everything old needs to go. We should start over. Take my hand. Now, of course, that didn't work out.
Which is what I don't like.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And again, there was a stretch of time when people thought that the theme of the movie was to kill the past and all that stuff, but technically that's not true. That's the viewpoint of Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren at that point is assuming the role of what's called the unreliable narrator, which is what bad guys tend to do when they're trying to coerce a good guy into becoming a bad guy. You do the unreliable narrator thing. So, although that may not necessarily have been what Ryan was trying to do on a meta level, he definitely made it very difficult for people to think that that wasn't at least partially what he was up to. But again,
also Ray should have taken his hand. That would have made the movie way more interesting.
it would have been cool if she had gone with him and then.
But you can't have Ray fuck up, no, because then that would destroy their princess.
Okay, so moving on, the Praetorian Guard fight choreography comes apart after a couple of views.
God. It's so bad.
Initially, it's this whirling, high-speed action scene. It's visually impactful, but it's literally only good if you watch the movie once.
Okay.
If you watch it more than once, you immediately start to notice all of the things about the fight scene that make no sense.
It kills me that Rey holds her lightsaber up and 3 guardsmen hack at it and they can't outmuscle her.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to tell you something that actually happened. I was at Jiu-Jitsu a few months ago, and as an end of class game with the kids class, my teacher Danilo was going to have me, just me, play tug of war against 10 kids. Aged like 7 to 13, probably. Younger kids. Let me tell you, man, those 10 kids all outmuscled me. I could not beat them in tug of war. Now, you're telling me that 3 grown-ass men with both hands on their weapon couldn't outmuscle a much smaller female with only 1 arm up? Like, it was so stupid, man.
No,
well, it's stupid for a lot of reasons. I mean, you could probably just say the Force, and I know that's not how it's supposed to work, but I don't know. They've torn the Force apart enough that the Force apart enough. But here's the thing: if 3 guys are attacking you, they're not all going for the same same spot. They're going to come at you at 3 different points. So, you'll block one guy. Oh no, I've been stabbed in the abdomen and the eye socket.
Well, and that's the other problem with sequel trilogy lightsaber fighting is I don't know if you guys watch the channel Shadiversity, but Shad he's a old time weapons expert. So he's one of those geeks that's into knowing how people actually fought with broadswords and stuff back in the Dark Ages. So he has a particular viewpoint on lightsaber battles because he's gone into the history of the choreography of it and so forth. Well, whoever the fight choreographer is for these 3 movies, I don't know if they got different ones or, if it was the same one for all 3 sequels, but it's different than the ones they used back in the day. Maybe that guy retired. Whoever it was, they went from fighting with swords made of lasers to fighting with lasers that they used like wiffle ball bats.
Mm-hmm.
They were literally just swinging baseball bats at each other's lightsaber. They weren't fighting to kill each other with lightsabers. They were smacking their lightsabers together like 2 kids playing with their lightsaber toys.
And that's another thing. If you watch the prequel fights or if you watch the OT fights, they're going for there's always someone who's on offense and someone's on defense. They aren't just banging sticks together.
Yeah.
Shadiversity actually went in and broke down the duels of the fates between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and he said it was one of the most competently put together modern sword fights he'd seen in a long time. He was like, there's a ton of trapping here. There's shit I understand. There's a lot of moments where I'm like, oh, he's fucked. Oh, but he did that thing. That is the thing you do to get out of that thing.
Right.
All right. And life goes on.
There was far more dynamic movement compared to the original trilogy, but it all fit,
And
and it fit from the narrative concept of the Jedi being at the height of their power and therefore were the best trained swordsmen that you would ever see. And that's what you saw.
And it fit even narratively too on Mustafar, because you could tell Anakin was overpowering Obi-Wan, and the whole time Obi-Wan was like, fuck, shit, fuck, goddamn it.
Yes, Obi-Wan was definitely on the defensive for the whole fight, and it made it extremely interesting.
Wasn't Vader played in part by an Olympic fencer in the OT?
In Empire and Jedi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. We're almost done here. Rose rescuing Finn from sacrifice, we already went over. The Finn Phasma rematch was terrible.
Yeah, I don't think we need to say anything else.
Because the first fight wasn't a fight. Chewie tackled her, they stuck a gun under her chin, and she shut the shields down. In the second movie, they have the confrontation, but there's no emotional weight to it because the opportunity to give it emotional weight, which was having them fight on Takodana, wasn't capitalized on. So there's really no reason for Phasma to really care at this point. Like, how do I describe this? The whole thing was just convoluted. Like when
also they ruined her character by showing like part of her face.
Yeah, that was stupid too. When Holdo pulls the Holdo maneuver and everybody gets separated in the explosion in the hangar bay, and then when Finn and Rose come to and they look up just to see Phasma and the stormtroopers coming through the smoke just for the artistic effect, made no sense. Was it cool? Yes. Made no sense. The actual fight, as brief as it was, I guess was okay. I did enjoy the fact that Phasma technically won. She beat Finn down, and then she beat Finn down, and then she turned and she took a couple of shots at Rose with her pistol and missed, but she still shot at Rose, which was cool.
Hitting her would have been cooler.
yeah, hitting her right square in the middle of the face would have been way better.
First on-screen bloody death in the history of Star Wars.
Oh no, it would have left like a burnt like coffee can shaped hole in her face.
That's a violent. Oh yeah,
but no blood though. Anyway, so the Finn Phasma rematch was terrible. Phasma got done dirty,
as every cool character is.
Just like every cool character. She gets snuck up on. Finn gets a terrible one-liner, and then Finn smashes her in the face with a wapiti stick and sends her careening into a flaming pit below the hangar bay, never to be seen again. I hoped that she would come back, but she didn't come back in The Rise of Skywalker, so apparently that is where Captain Phasma died, which was
I'm kind of glad
lower levels of the burning Star Destroyer supremacy.
I'm kind of sick of characters falling into obscurity and coming back magically. I'm kind of sick of that. So I'm glad.
I do agree with you. I mean, and that you don't get more ambiguous and end than Sidious. Like, who knows if, like, obviously he could walk away from that. Like all he did was fall down a nuclear reactor, and then the station he was in blew up.
Everybody was hoping that Han was going to live when they heard that he was in Episode 9 before we found out about the whole Force Ghost, Ben's memory type thing. I mean, people really thought that they were going to figure out a way to retcon him living after being stabbed and just dropped a mile down into the core of Starkiller Base. But whatever. Okay. BB-8 driving the AT-ST. Terrible.
Dumb.
It looked as horribly CGI.
It looked like a Star Wars ride at Disney.
As Anakin floating that peach over to Padme.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was that bad. I really didn't like that. Next thing I didn't like. So Rey just gets done having an extremely emotional lightsaber battle with Kylo Ren. She tore the Luke Skywalker lightsaber in half by having a forced tug of war with Kylo Ren. She witnessed Supreme Leader Snoke being killed. She just killed all the Praetorian Guard, and she was on the ship when Admiral Holdo pulled the Holdo maneuver. The next time we see her, she's in the belly gun of the Falcon.
Without a scratch on her.
Without a scratch on her, minus the little scratch on her arm that she got from the one Praetorian Guard.
Her hair is like perfectly done.
Her hair, yeah, she had time to fix her hair, and she's in such a good mood that she is whooping with joy and exclaiming that I like this as she uses the quad laser cannon in the belly of the Millennium Falcon to shoot 3 First Order TIE fighters in sequence all at once. So for as good of a shot as Luke Skywalker was, as Han was, as Finn was, obviously Anakin was never on the Falcon. I'm just talking about people who are actually people who use the quad laser cannons on the Falcon. Of all the people who manned those cannons in the movies, Rey was obviously the bestest ever. And not only is she the bestest ever, but after she gets done blowing up those TIE fighters, you get that absolutely horrible whoop from Finn, which
I think we've covered already.
Yeah, which just makes him sound like a moron. Would you please stop making the man just scream for no reason? And then
he's a very talented actor, damn it.
And then she just had this horribly emotionally draining sequence with Kylo Ren, and now all of a sudden she's in the best mood ever while she's effectively murdering people while shooting their ships out of the sky.
Yeah.
You know,
imagine like if as Anakin was lapping up with "Woo, I like this."
Yeah, like you gotta pick an emotional escape.
Jeff, I want to paint a scene for you. You're just coming back from like the funeral of a close family member, and you're still in your black suit, just sad. And I go up to you and I go, "Hey, buddy, how was the service good? I know this is a rough time for you, and I know you just got diagnosed with cancer, and you're now allergic to dogs, so it's just a bummer. But I got the Falcon, and you can go on the cannon. Let's mow down people for fun."
I was wondering where you were going with that. Yeah, that's pretty much
like,
the only difference is that by the time Jeff left the funeral home, he would be in his underwear by the time he got to the parking lot.
Yeah.
So he would not be in a suit. He would be in his underpants, manning the gun turret of the Millennium Falcon.
Or imagine during the raid of the Jedi Temple when Anakin walks into the fruitful younglings, he activates the lightsaber and goes, "Woo! I like this."
Yeah, see, I was waiting for that, and that upsets me. So the excitement that Rey showed moments after the Kylo Ren battle was just a little too ridiculous. The Holdo maneuver is idiotic and it breaks canon.
Yeah,
I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
I don't want to keep dragging on every point, but he has very publicly stated that he had lore checkers and fact checkers that worked with him and assured him that it would fit into the universe.
Yeah, definitely.
Assuming that you're getting paid a handsome sum to basically codify what this guy wants to do, how do you, as a Star Wars expert, bullshit your way into justifying this thing being legitimate?
You tell me if I was like Matt Martin.
If I paid you $1 million to tell me how this makes sense, and you had to sell it,
and now I'm on a debate stage, and I'm the guy who has to defend the point that the Holdo maneuver was worth it for the visual.
No, not worth it for the visual. I'm saying using your lore knowledge of Star Wars, and Ed and Jeff, you're in on this too. How do you, like, say I'm Ryan, hey, Ed, I'm paying you to be a fact checker, and I really want to include this scene, but I need you to give me a flimsy justification for it being okay lore-wise.
It's 1 in a million. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff's pretty much dead on, and that's the thing that they use to retcon this scenario in Rise of Skywalker, because they're really the only way to justify what she did is by saying that it was literally an impossible move, to the degree that if we're going to assume that the Force is now sentient in the Disney Star Wars universe, that it was literally the Force that helped her to aim the MC-85 to hit the supremacy in the exact spot that it did.
By saying it was 1 in a million, I like the implication of that too, because it sort of implies that Holdo didn't mean to do that because it was so impossible, and that her true intention was to flee like a coward. But
yeah, I think it was either
Mahler brought that up.
I was going to say it was Maul or a Robot Head, where they were laughing about how if like under any other circumstances she basically would have just jumped to hyperspace and just like peaced out.
She would have just been fine living.
All she's trying to do is just flee like a cat.
Just to run.
The Holdo maneuver takes on a very different meaning now. Holdo maneuver is when you abandon your comrades in their hour of need, like a coward.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah,
we
that's like an Irish maneuver.
Right, we should run away, flee.
You know what? That's what we're going to do. We're going to start referring to the Irish goodbye as a Holdo maneuver. So whenever somebody leaves just by slamming the door, be like, I got Holdo maneuvered. That'll make it fun again.
All right.
Make Holdo maneuvers fun again. All right. And then the last thing that I did not like about episode 8 is that in the final scene on the Millennium Falcon, when what we are led to believe is the remaining members of the Resistance, the fact that they can fit inside the Falcon is already a pretty rough topic, because the Falcon's not the biggest ship in the world, although it is a cargo freighter.
What do you think, 50?
I think there was less than that.
Yeah, so basically...
It is. Hold on. The point that I'm making is that the celebratory vibe inside the Falcon makes absolutely no sense. And if there was somehow a way where my suspension of disbelief had not been broken up to that point, it would have been broken by everybody on the Falcon hugging and celebrating like it was a mini Return of the Jedi ending after they had just gotten the shit kicked out of them and decimated down to the point where there's now enough of them to fit in the back of the Falcon.
So I heard someone try and justify it by saying, like, it's a group of guys or soldiers saying, man, so basically saying the equivalent of, man, how the hell did we get out of that one? It's like, but that's dumb. Like you don't see your friends get murdered next to you, and then they're like, boy, man, that was a hell of an ordeal, wasn't it?
Yeah, those are people who have never experienced real stress in their lives.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the call from when Sean's in Kuwait. Just he's like calling me up, dude. I got Croc. He was over for Thanksgiving. Really cool dude. Dude, his brains are all over me right now. We barely got out of that one. Like he's not. It's very, very disingenuous, and that was his moment. That was his moment to bring back some legitimacy to the Empire Strikes Back comparisons, just because that movie doesn't sugarcoat it. They ate a big L. Luke's down an arm. Han is gone. Everyone's sad, and Luke just found out that his father is a murderer. And that his mentor lied to him. He's absolutely knackered.
The vibe at the end of episode 3 and episode 5 is down but not out.
Yeah, tepid hope. Like when Lando says, "We will find Han." I gotta stay hopeful because I'm the only hopeful guy left right now.
Yeah. The overall narrative flow of the movie the whole movie just didn't make sense on one hand. On another hand, it makes perfect sense. But on the hand that it makes perfect sense on, it's balled into a fist. I don't really know how else to describe how I feel about this movie.
It
you
makes
know?
It only makes sense if its intention was to be bad.
Makes sense from a meta point of view, which is what all these movies are meant to be. Meta. The first fucking line of the first movie in this trilogy is a meta line.
Yeah, and once again, I think that The Last Jedi just goes to confirm what Jeff said in the last episode, which is if you're at all confused as to why the Disney trilogy feels familiar, but at the same time, there's just something off about it, it's because they truly are trying to put you, in effect, into a theme park ride. And instead of sitting in a car and them, taking you through a ride, you are Rey in avatar form, and you are following Rey / you all the way through these movies. So all of her experiences are your experiences, and all of the historical canonical cues are supposed to make you go like, oh, that's for me, like.
And that's why I think
it's
people,
it's supposed to create some sort of an immersion factor,
and that's why I think
that doesn't play.
And that's why I think people didn't like the prequels, because everyone saw Anakin awkwardly trying to hit on the hot senator and not realizing that that's probably what they would do. Everyone saw Anakin try to get greedy and follow the dark side, and nobody wants to have that self introspection and be like, man, I could do that too. That's me,
I think the biggest problem, from what I can understand with the prequels that a lot of people had, was that the dialogue seemed off.
The dialogue's fine.
The problem is that in the original trilogy, despite the fact that George wrote the scripts, and for the most part, the lines are read the way that he wrote them, he did allow for a lot more personal interpretation from the actors.
Yeah.
And as a result, them trying to make their lines easier to recite also made their lines a little more realistic.
Yeah.
In the prequels, I think because you were dealing with an era-specific set of movies, and you were also dealing with a George Lucas who could have things exactly the way he wanted them, you ended up with a much more classically told, very
almost Shakespearean, like
very exactly, very specific in the way the dialogue was presented, and as a result, it comes off much less real in terms of like, this isn't the way that people talk. This isn't the way that people talk to each other in the street or at a bar.
They're stoic warrior monks.
Exactly, you're dealing with,
but like the guys who talk like. But the guys who you see who are like the average Joe, like Watto and Dexter Jester, they talk like when Dexter Jester says how big your pocketbook is, like
how can you do this?
Yeah, like the few guys we see like from the streets, like these average Joe guys, they talk like average Joe guys. Anyway,
that is a good point.
We gotta wrap it up.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, so anyway, that was our critical analysis of The Last Jedi. I don't know how this is going to sound when we replay it for ourselves. I'll be curious.
Do you think? Like I like how we were a little bit more positive and rose tinted when it came to The Force Awakens. Yeah. Do you think that same level? I don't think we were able to maintain that for this one, just because this is really when the facade started to tear apart. I think we tried. I think it's going to be evident when we listen back to it. But I also think that, the same way that, the movie itself had a very specific effect on me and how I felt about Star Wars, reviewing it and going back over those points, it didn't open up an old wound or anything, but it definitely reinforced all of the things that I wrote down when we all sat here and talked about it, for sure.
Yeah, ready?
All right, so we will We will see you again soon for our episode 9 breakdown. Expect that to be a lot more positive. I genuinely liked episode 9,
Here-
and these guys
You're
love
brain
laughing
damaged.
about it. But
A lot more debating.
I think we'll debate a little bit more for that one. It'll be more fun in that regard. But we are well over 2 hours at this point, and that is the music if you haven't heard. So for Kevin and for Jeff, this is Ed Scissorhands Berberich. We will see you next time on the Amperu Experience. And if you are not on target yet, you need to get on target so that I can tell you that you need to stay on target.
Stay on target.